Hi, this is Claudia Filos with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I'm so happy today to be here with Olga Levaniouk, who is a professor of classics at the University of Washington, and with members of our community. Olga, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, Olga, I just want to let some people know a little bit more about your backgrounds and your interests. You're currently the Associate Professor of Classics at the University of Washington. You have a PhD from Harvard. Your research really centers around Homer and the song culture of ancient Greece. You are particularly interested in the topics of myth and ritual, lyric poetry, drama, comparative and historical linguistics, oral traditional poetry and poetics in Greece and beyond. And you're really adept at using a comparative approach, and that's one thing that you're going to bring to our talk today. So we're really excited to have that. In addition, I just want to let people know that your book, Eve of the Festival, Making Myth in Odyssey 19, is available, the full text, on the CHS website. It's absolutely a gorgeous book, and much of what we will be discussing today is part of one of your chapters, maybe chapter 13 on the dream. I can't remember exactly the number, but that's the title.
I also don't remember, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So, but it's an absolutely gorgeous book, and everyone can read it for free on the CHS website. And you're currently working on a comparative study of Greek weddings with a focus on the performances made by the bride and by her mother and her age mates. So you have such a diverse skill set, and it's such a beautiful topic that you're here to discuss with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Claudia. You make me blush.
No, okay. That's what I love to do most, actually. But let me let everyone know what we're going to talk about, which is we're looking at a scene in Odyssey Scroll 19, and we're going to be talking about the dream of Penelope, and you're also going to be bringing in the dream of a character called Barchin from a Turkic epic. Can you tell us a little bit about these two and what got you interested in this?
So maybe the easiest way to do it is, let me just start by saying how I got into this. In my book, I wasn't going to do anything comparative, and I didn't know much about this Uzbek epic Alpamış, except for having read a version of it as a child. You know, the way my son now reads a version of Gilgamesh in children's books. That was my acquaintance with it. But I had a book at home. In any case, I was working on this dream in the Odyssey 19 without anything comparative, and you know, as a parallel, I basically was sort of stuck on some elements of it. So I started looking for parallels, hoping that maybe something will help me. And gradually found my way to a grown-up translation of Alpamış, where so sometimes it's good to read books as children, and actually was sort of reminded about it by my aunt, of all people. I thank you for that in introduction to my book, because that really helped. She reminded me that, remember, there was that story about Alpamış. I looked at it, and there was a dream that seemed to me to offer some insights. So I, at that point, have really already reached all of my conclusions based on the Odyssey itself, so I didn't really use it to discover anything about the Odyssey, but I used it at that point to support my argument, to essentially persuade other people that the outrageous claims I'm making about Penelope's dream in Odyssey 19 might actually be worthy of thinking about.
Right. And so you feel like, you know, this comparative method is a way really to test your ideas out. Then
I think it's a way of testing the ideas. It was for me at that instance, but it can be more too, because at that point, at the point that I wrote the book, I only knew one version. By the time I gave the paper you just referred to, I knew 3 versions, and that made a big difference. So then I looked further into Alpamış, and when I saw the variation, something that we don't have in the Odyssey, that really turned the sort of comparative material from something that I just used to say, look, things like that can happen, to more of yes, and sort of a tool to explore the Odyssey. Now,
Yeah.
I do think that it's never okay to say X happens in Uzbek epic and therefore X must happen in Homeric epic. But it really, I think, what comparative studies do for me is they open up possibilities. Right? When you think about what options there are for interpreting this, what can you possibly consider? This is where comparative study really makes a difference for me, because I would never myself, based on my personal life or what I know from ancient Greece, come up with some of these options. And so the more you know of comparative material, the more likely you are to even notice some things in your text, because you just have a broader base on which to from which to analyze it. So it's not so much that it creates a model which you then mechanically apply to Greek, but rather it really sort of opens up the range of possibilities, the horizons that you have when you're thinking about it.
Right. So can I ask you, can you help then set the stage for us by sharing just a little bit about what the portion of the epic of Alpamish that you're interested in, and then also what's happening in scroll 19?
Yeah. So let me tell you then what I actually what I am actually arguing, and what I think the Uzbek epic supports. And why I think it was so interesting for me. So let me first remind you, probably everybody in this group knows Penelope's dream very well, but just to briefly review it, the famous dream in book 19, Penelope and Odysseus are sitting by the fire. They are facing each other for the first time. Odysseus is dressed as a beggar, and Penelope says, "But come interpret this dream for me. I had 20 geese, and they were feeding at the trough, and then this eagle came and killed my geese, and I was lamenting for them in my dream. And then the eagle returned and sat on the roof of the house and said, be brave, or don't lose heart, daughter of Icarius. It's not a dream, but a waking vision," or that's my translation. It's controversial. "Which will be fulfilled. The geese are the suitors, and I am Odysseus, and I will bring," it says, "unseemly fate," which means death, to all of the suitors. And then, of course, Penelope then turns to Odysseus, who is not in the dream, but the real Odysseus, and says, or the beggar, and says, "Interpret it for me." And the beggar says, "There is no way to interpret this dream in a different way. Odysseus himself told you how it will come out." So that's a dream. And it has been a very controversial part of the poem, because people argue whether the geese are the suitors or they're not suitors. Why does the eagle come back? Does Penelope know that Odysseus is Odysseus, that the beggar is Odysseus? Does Penelope feel affection for the suitors? Very often this is said that Penelope cries about these geese, and that means that secretly, at least, she feels affection for the suitors, and this is sort of her dream is a way of processing it somehow. So it was what I discovered looking at Alpamish is that in 3 different versions, a woman on the verge of her beloved's arrival sees a dream that I think is quite similar to in large morphological structures to Penelope's dream. And now I should probably preface it by a kind of more general similarity. Alpamish in general bears many similarities to the Odyssey, to the extent that some people think it's really, this is sort of 2 variations on this returning husband story that seems to be spread all over Asia and the around Black Sea and and in Greece, and it's really hard to tell where it goes from where.
Right,
But it's a widely circulating tale.
The general plot is that the hero Alpamish and his cousin Barchin are betrothed with children, right, and then separated.
Yes, and then they're separated. They're separated, and she is living in the land of the Kalmyks, and 99, I believe, Kalmyks are wooing her. So that's very similar to Penelope. But she sends a message to Alpamish to come and rescue her, and so Alpamish is on his way. And he arrives in the nick of time and competes, in contest against all the Kalmyks, and wins Barchin. And so that's the first part of the epic. And I should add also that the second part bears other similarities to the Odyssey. So in this part where she is about to be given out to one of the Kalmyks and he arrives on the last day, that's obviously similar to our scene, and she sees the dream on the eve of his arrival. So she sees the dream at night, and then they literally go out onto the road and they wait for Alpamish to arrive. But it also, the epic as a whole also has other similarities to the Odyssey. Then there is a second part of the epic. They return back and they have a son and everything is fine for a while, but then Alpamish leaves and he gets imprisoned and he doesn't come back for a long time. And again, Barchin is about to be given out to somebody else, to somebody who actually usurped Alpamish's place. But Alpamish comes back yet again at the last moment, dressed as a beggar.
Wow.
Gets to the wedding feast and persuades everybody that he is Alpamish by stringing and shooting his old bow. That reminds you of something, right? And of course, then regains his rightful place. So it's sort of like the Odyssey repeated twice, different parts of it.
So fascinating. Okay.
Different permutations. In any case, let's go back to the dream of Barchin on the eve of Alpamish's arrival. So when I looked at this, just one version, I was attracted by the fact that in this dream, Barchin sees an eagle. Now, this is the most extended, lengthy version by Fazil Yoldash-Oghli, where she sees demons, and among them is this huge eagle, and the eagle attacks her, and she is terrified.
Yes.
So my initial connection was, well, it's eagle there, and it's eagle in the Odyssey. But what in the end ended up mattering more for my interpretation was not that, but that this eagle, or in the same dreams there is also a tiger present, ended up being in the dream is terribly destructive. Mm-hmm. It's a terrifying, destructive image. And when I looked at other versions, there weren't eagle any longer. In one version it was altogether wind, which destroyed the yurt of Barchin. And in the third version it was a tiger, not a tiger, a wolf who ate her sheep. Okay. But in all cases, she has her household, her sheep, her yurt. Sometimes he also dishevels her clothes and hair. Mm-hmm. So she has her orderly household, and this hostile force arrives. It's a wind that breaks it. It's an eagle that hurts her. It's a tiger that bites her. It's a wolf that eats her sheep. And every time there is somebody there to whom Barchin turns for interpretation. She wakes up in the morning and she is surrounded by other women. It's either her friends or just one friend or her mother. And she says, I had this terrifying dream. Can you interpret it for me? And in some versions, in one version, she says, interpret it for the better, not for the worse. And in all cases, the female companions, mother or friends, then say, it seems terrible, but actually it's good, because whatever is the terrible thing in the dream is actually Alpamish.
Okay, so he's the force. Yeah. He's that.
Yeah, he is the eagle. Force. He is the tiger. He is the wind. And it's not destruction. It's actually what seems like destruction. What makes her cry when she wakes up actually turns out to be her salvation.
Wow. Okay.
So that's where I thought, wait a second, there is no question in Alpamish that Barchin is somehow in love with the Kalmyks. There is no, they haven't been courting her, as people say about Penelope. Well, she is an older woman who has been alone for 20 years, and here are these young people who are courting her. Well, Barchin isn't an older woman. She hasn't been alone for 20 years, but nevertheless, she still, nevertheless, she sees a dream in which somehow at first it seems like she's losing something that is dear to her, like her sheep.
Yes.
And then it turns out that the sheep are actually the Kalmyks. Or another version, she loses something that is dear to her, like her yurt. And then it turns out that the 99 poles of the destroyed yurt are actually the 99 suitors that are Kalmyks. And so this is not destruction, this is actually good. Mm-hmm. That reversal, I think, is exactly what we find in the Odyssey. The geese that Penelope sees, that at first it seems like it's her household which is destroyed, and then it turns out that actually this is not destruction. The geese are actually the suitors. The eagle is actually Odysseus. And I think the interpretations that sort of overlook that always miss this really sharp disjunction in the Odyssey, where the eagle says, I was eagle before, but now I am Odysseus. Mm. So he is himself performing this reversal. I think Janet has a...
Yes, I was just going to say, I think Jan has that. And also, Olga, I want to let you know, we do have a slide prepared, if you would like to use it, of the text itself, if you wanted to read that.
Oh, okay, yes.
Questions, yeah. Okay.
Sure. Hi, Olga. Welcome back. And I'm Janet from New York. Can you also talk about Barchin's reaction when Alphemish comes back?
Well, in one of the versions, it's actually very interesting because Barchin she's been pining for Alphemish. She's been waiting for him to arrive. She thinks that marrying one of the Kalmyks is like death. And then Alphemish arrives, and she more or less welcomes him by saying, "Oh, okay, so you're here. So what?" It's very striking. So that's another. With this particular version of Barchin, we see very clearly that there are ways for a bride to behave on this occasion. Even Barchin, it doesn't run and just sort of put her arms around Alphemish. She holds him back. He has to win the contest first. So there is that parallel as well. And another thing that I'm not sure, Janet, if I'm answering your question or not. And then another thing is that I think in the Odyssey, it's interesting that Alphemish, of course, arrives on the next day. So Barchin there, she wakes up crying. She is comforted by women, and only then Alphemish appears. She doesn't discuss this dream with him. In the Odyssey, what I think is so fascinating to me about this dream is that Odysseus sort of steps into the role that is not strictly speaking his, and I think that explains some of the peculiarities of the dream in the Odyssey, where and the fact that there are other Achaean women mentioned in the dream. They are crying together with Penelope for the geese, but they're not interpreting the dream for her. That instead is done by the eagle in the dream, which I can come back to. It's a very striking feature. But that notion of a bride waking up on the eve of her, in this case, of her beloved arriving, I actually found later on, even after the paper about Barchin and Penelope, and way later than the book, I found that there are many cultures where a bride on the eve of her wedding sees some kind of dream. And in particular, I was working on this comparative study of Russian weddings and Greek weddings, and um, in Russian village weddings, this is actually part of the ritual. So you are required to see the dream on the last day. On the last day before the wedding, the bride wakes up, her friends are there, and she cries and laments, and she says, "How did you sleep, my dear friends? I slept terribly. I had this awful dream." And then she narrates her dream.
Wow.
And it's not usually the same dream as in Barchin, it's not usually reversed, but it's a dream that tells that basically is about how terrible her married life will be. and
it's not like not only does she have the dream, but the point is that she reports the dream. Right?
Yeah, and the friends comfort her. So the parallel here is not so much that the content of the dream is the same, but I think we are talking about the Odyssey, the Uzbek epics recorded in the beginning of 20th century, and now we are talking about not even epics, but village rituals in northern Russia, in northwestern Russia. But the content of the dream might be different, but the notion that the bride, right before she gets married, has this dream and reports it to her friends is itself entirely conventional. So I don't know, maybe some girls actually do see a dream, but whether you see it or not, in actuality, you better wake up and say, "I've seen this dream." And the dream, the content is different from Alfamish, but it's conventional. The girl sees something like flood waters coming and carrying her away from her house, and she's trying to hold on to trees and branches along the river, and the waters just keep carrying her her forward. So it's ritually conditioned that she should see this dream and what she should see approximately.
That is amazing. Okay, yeah, Sarah.
Hi, this is Sarah Scott from Scotland. And I was quite interested in this reversal that you were talking about in Penelope's dream, because unlike a new bride, she is sort of still already married. Do you think that's perhaps where part of that reversal comes, that she doesn't quite carry on as she would if she were a young unmarried woman about to get married for the first time? She starts that, and then it kind of goes back, like everything kind of goes forward and goes back in the Odyssey, doesn't it?
Yes, well, I definitely think that the fact that she is already married matters a lot for the Odyssey, because I think that in the Odyssey, Penelope doesn't actually see the dream. I stick my neck out about that and say that I don't believe that this is presented to us as an actual dream Penelope has. There are only two dreams in Homer where the authorial voice, the poet's voice, doesn't tell us that the dream actually happened, and the other one is the one that Odysseus tells to Eumaeus, where this dream is presented as a trick. He tells a story about how Odysseus was very clever and invented a dream to save him from frostbite. So in this is the second one, and I think that that's not an accident. I also think that so what I think is Penelope is not within the dream. Penelope presents herself as a kind of Barchin figure. She presents herself as a woman who sees this terrifying dream and she needs an interpretation. But outside of the dream, Penelope, that is within the Odyssey but not within the dream, is a very different figure, right? She is not a young girl seeing a terrifying dream on the eve of her marriage. She is an Odysseus's equal, a very crafty woman who creates this narrative, who creates this dream story to test Odysseus, to communicate with Odysseus, to mark this moment. And I think it's even, in this paper, I again sort of stick my neck out and say that she makes the eagle, when Penelope is the poet of the song, right? Penelope is the one who actually utters the words of the eagle, who says, "This is not dream, this is waking vision." So I think she uses a kind of prophetic language by performing the song that a bride would see on the eve of her beloved's arrival at precisely the moment which she thinks should become the eve of her beloved's arrival. So in doing that, she is saying, and I think Odysseus, I prophesy, I assert that Odysseus will come back tomorrow. So that's I think is where Penelope, who is already married in the Odyssey, is. I see her quite differently from somebody who is actually from Barchin, who actually just really sees a dream and is really confused about it. But I think Penelope at this point might worry about the outcome, but I don't think she's confused about anything.
Right. She's such a master storyteller in your argument, because she's controlling the narrative completely at that
Exactly.
moment.
So I think that, how we always say that, there is a book by Barbara Layton about Penelopean poetics in the Odyssey, where she argues that sort of the narrator takes on some aspects of Penelope's voice, and I think this is one of the moments like this. I absolutely agree that this happens. Narrator merges with Odysseus, narrator in the Iliad merges with Achilles. Well, I think Penelope here becomes Homer, in a sense, or Homer merges with Penelope, where she is literally weaving the plot of this song.
Yes. Yeah, Bill. Bill, you have a question.
Hi, Bill Moulton from Alaska. Okay, so I really like your argument there. It makes a lot of sense to me. So if she made up the dream, why is it geese and why is it only 20 geese?
Why is it geese? Well, my take is that geese are, being distracted by a kitten. He wasn't supposed to be here. My argument that, my thought is that geese are supposed to be symbols of fidelity. Geese in antiquity are regarded as particularly good spouses. They're faithful mates. And also, if you think of Capitoline geese, who sort of serve like dogs and they warn about enemies approaching, geese are seen as good guardians. Aristotle talks about that. They make good guards. So this is what Penelope has been. She has been a faithful mate and a good guardian. And I think that the number 20 doesn't correspond to the original number of the suitors or whatever else people have tried to say. The suitors are 108, not 20. I think the number 20 corresponds to, well, where do you hear 20? 20 is always heard in the Odyssey. Odysseus will come in the 20th years. He's been away for 20 years. So I think this is 20 years of her being the guardian of this house. And the eagle comes and destroys it all. Oh, but no, he doesn't. It's actually Odysseus.
So she's really sending Odysseus a message about herself and what she's been doing while he was gone.
Yes, and I think she continues to do it. I think she already has started doing it when she told the myth of the nightingale, the Iadon. Mm-hmm. She already was. She was. I think that at this point, because this is part of my sort of larger argument that at this point it's not even the question for me whether Penelope recognizes Odysseus. It's rather that this beggar at this point has made a claim, a veiled claim, a coded claim that he is Odysseus. And this claim has been understood by Penelope and accepted. At least she is betting that this is Odysseus. So it's not for me, I think it's a very different matter from just saying, oh, she looks at beggar and she recognizes him or she doesn't recognize him. He has claimed to be Odysseus. And she is going to honor this claim. She thinks it's true. Is she 100% sure? Who knows? But then that's why she tells him about what she has been doing, what she has been to him, and what she expects of him, if indeed he is Odysseus.
Because the timing of that, right?
Of the suitors tomorrow.
It's the contest, right? It's
Yeah, and then she says, and immediately after the dream, if you really are Odysseus, then tomorrow every single one of the suitors will be dead, and then she says, look, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll set up this contest, and he says, yes, go ahead and do that. And think of how illogical this is if you look at it formally. He was just telling her that Odysseus is in Tisprotia, and he is going to come back in a few days. And now she says, well, I'm not going to wait. I'm setting up the bow contest tomorrow. And yet he says, yes, exactly. Odysseus will be here tomorrow. This beggar knows.
They do seem to understand each other.
I think there is just a very masterful communication goes there, and this communication occurs not just through hints, but through stories like this. Through really, I think they're like two brilliant singers, two brilliant bards who perform stories for each other and understand each other's stories. And it doesn't matter how many maids are in the room; they will not be able to follow this.
Right, right. Awesome. Do we have any other? Oh, great, Janet.
So it's the night before the wedding, in a way, for Penelope and Odysseus, and if audience is expecting this dream, right? That the bride will tell a dream, and she tells the dream. For the audience side, from the Odysseus side, what does this dream tell them? What do you think about that?
What does it tell them about Penelope, you mean? Or I don't know. It's very hard to know what the audience would think. But she performs it actually, I think, not so much when the audience expects her to tell the dream, but when the audience expects her to see a dream. Right? She sees a dream at night, and then she should be telling it to her friends in the morning. But instead, she tells the dream at the very moment where she should be seeing it. Which is one of the reasons why I don't think she actually sees the dream. I think the dream story, when exactly did she see it? It's a dream that's supposed to be seen on the night after which he arrives. So it's all wrong if she has seen it 2 weeks ago.
Right. Right, but instead of having the dream, she's already there with Odysseus.
She's telling it. Sorry, what?
Yes.
Yeah, but instead of having the dream, she's already there with Odysseus.
She's already there with Odysseus, and she is telling it at the very time when she should be seeing it. I think the audience, yes, Janet, I think the audience must have heard songs like this. I think it would be recognizable to them. I think that this tradition of the dream on the eve of the wedding existed in ancient Greece, not only in modern Russia. I don't know what the dreams were, but maybe there were something like Barchin's dream. Maybe there was a terrifying dream. I know that there is always as a sort of push and pull in wedding songs. Some of them are really dark, and some of them are really happy. And what really struck me in Russian weddings is that it sort of transition within the same day. You perform the songs when everything is terrible, and then suddenly everything is beautiful. There are just these voices that are allowed to mix and coexist, and not necessarily entirely resolve one into the other. And I see the same properties in ancient Greek wedding poetry. There is the longing for maidenhood. There is the fear there is the image of a man as a monster. Actually, I even think that if you think of Odyssey 6, I think that is another place where wedding poetics are present. And I think this sort of this picture of Odysseus emerging as a naked, bride-encrusted man, and all the girls who are playing on the seashore scattering and running away from him. I think that's part of the sort of wedding language too. It's terrifying prospect, and so I think that the dream of the bride, the panicked last moment dream of the bride, was conventional, and that people expected that this will be reversed.
I mean, so it's an opportunity maybe to express things that need to be expressed, or that are traditionally at least expected to be expressed, that kind of fear.
Well, for the real brides, as for Barchin, I think, for the real brides, yes, I think it is some kind of expression of the tension of this moment. But I think Penelope then uses it very artfully in the Odyssey for her own aims. But again, there is a similar tension, and it's applicable because there is a similar tension here. Will it? Barchin doesn't know Alpamish. She wants to marry Alpamish, but she doesn't know him. So there is this real sort of, on the one hand, there is this unworthy suitors. On the other hand, there is this eagle or tiger. I think the tension of the moment is there in the Odyssey too. Odysseus might be killed by the suitors. Maybe he is not the same as of old. Maybe everything will come crashing down. So maybe there is also, yes, some of the sort of anxiety that attends the last night before the wedding is also attending the last night before the bow contest in the Odyssey.
So actually, can I ask a question about that, since we're talking about sort of the night before the wedding? I mean, just from what I have understood from your previous presentations and papers, can we return to some of the details of the visions of the dreams in Barchin? Yes. In one of the versions, I think perhaps the second version, there's a bit more of an explicit sort of sexual dynamic in the dream, which is that there's a hawk, and the hawk actually lands on Barchin, right? And I think you talk about how he cuts her breasts and her thighs.
Yes.
And that seems like a very terrifying thing, but then, of course, she wakes up, and in that case, as you say, her mother is there and interprets the dream and says, well, basically, don't worry, this is your beloved who is going to touch you. I mean, that seems like a very important part of the Barchin dream in terms of the placement and the function of that dream, and I'm wondering, I mean, there doesn't seem to be, or maybe I'm just forgetting, really explicit sort of sexual things in, or not explicit, but
yeah, that's a good question. Is there an explicit sexual thing in the Odyssey? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm wondering. I mean,
sure.
Or maybe the erotic part is just them talking to each other, telling stories. I mean, right? I mean, he's already there.
There is definitely nothing as explicit as in Barchin dreams, and actually the third one is even, in some ways it's even, well, both are sort of very sexually explicit. In the third one, he sort of undresses her yurt, and he takes off the yurt has several layers. Can you say what a yurt is in case people don't know? So it's a dwelling made out of these poles, which intersect at the top, and then there is fabric wrapped around it, and it has several layers. And so the wind gradually undresses this yurt. It takes off the upper layer and then the middle layer, and the middle layer is composed to her sash, and the lower layer to other parts of her clothing. So the undressing of the yurt corresponds to undressing of Barchin. So there is also very explicit sexual imagery.
Right.
In the dream.
Which was, of course, very appropriate to that kind of moment, right, on the eve of a young maiden's wedding.
It's very appropriate to this kind of moment. But I don't see it in the Odyssey. Maybe I should go and look at the text again. What I do see is in the longest version, which is actually the sort of less sexualized of them, where it's more veiled. Barchin and Alpamish actually see dreams at the same time.
Oh.
And Penelope and Odysseus don't see dreams at the same time, but when Penelope tells her dream, which corresponds to the dream of Barchin, well, actually, no. It says in a sense they do see dreams in the same time, because there is, or experience something. This is in the next book, in book 20, when they go to bed after the conversation in book 19, and Penelope has this dream in which Odysseus Let me just try to.
Yeah. We can look that up. And also, the other thing we can do, Olga, is we could pull up the passage of the dream in Odyssey 19. Maybe we can read that together.
We could do that. I have yes. So in book 20, there Odysseus can't sleep, and he talks to Athena, and Athena promises him help. And just as Odysseus falls asleep, Penelope wakes up and she tells of the dreams that she just had. And this dream, that's where I think there is a sort of sexualized echo of sexual contact, because she says, Artemis, take me out of here. I want to become like the daughters of Pandarius. Take me to the ends of the earth and drop me into Okeanos. Other people have rest when they are asleep at night, but I don't. I always have terrible dreams, she says, evil dreams. This night, somebody was by me. Somebody was lying by her. That is who was like Odysseus, the way he was when he left with the army.
Wow.
So she really has this vivid dream that Odysseus has already come back and is by her at night.
Right. And what's so cool is that we do get these visions of her up lamenting at night, right? Which for me, I think is really interesting. I think is part of signaling that she's faithful to him, right? When she's up lamenting at night. And also the way that, I love what you point out there about how they switch from him being awake to her being awake. And it's almost like together they're keeping their guards up.
Yeah, or something like that. So that also reminds me of this kind of connection between them that the narrative suggests, like with Alpamish and Barchin, where they don't know that they're dreaming, but they're dreaming the dreams about tomorrow at the same time. And his dream is just, a straightforward dream that presages successful outcome. But her dream is this terrible, anxious dream where everything is destroyed, and that has to be interpreted for the better.
Amazing. So do we have any questions? Oh, yeah, great. Zoe.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I just wonder back to that. So there is a lot of this. The dream is a little bit part of the courtship and the exchange, but I wonder, in terms of the bow competition and reaching the stochos, and that this seems to me, could we consider that like this athletic prowess as something that is touching on sort of a kind of this directness that a sexual thing, kind of component has, and the idea of reaching a target through, kind of finding the way to a target, finding that straight line that reaches the stochos and ultimately gives you this, some kind of fertility, let's say. And I know this is a stretch, but I just wonder, just going back to this athletic, the prowess of the bow versus that. This is just a question more so than,
That's a beautiful, thoughtful suggestion.
I think that with these things, they can be sometimes actively explored and sometimes passively, but it's almost unavoidable, that some such thinking is going on. You made me think of there are images of Odysseus and Circe, and on one part after another, the images of Odysseus. There's a famous one in which Odysseus is on one side and Circe on the other side of the pot. And Odysseus always has this very long sword, and Circe is always holding a pot. We don't have a text to go with this, but considering that everybody else, with a similar parallel episode to here, everybody else's young men fail, but Odysseus arrives, and he is a match for this incredibly powerful female, and she immediately invites him to her bed because he is worthy of it, and the others don't. Well, I think Penelope is almost a sort of witch-like, nymph-like figure, a divinely powerful female who, none of these young men will get her, but Odysseus is the one who gets her. So yes, I can go with that. I have no objection to that.
Just what you're saying right now is so interesting to me. When we think about the other female characters in the Odyssey who are really impeding Odysseus on his way for the most part. I mean, he does occasionally get help, but they sort of slow down his progress to home. And then once he gets home, it seems like Penelope is sort of jump-starting it and saying, okay, we're not going to have this is not going to go on for a long time, this unknown period. Like, here's my dream, here's what it is, what it means, and now we're going to have the boat contest tomorrow morning. Like, let's go.
Yeah. So I do see it as almost her, calling him out on the claim he has made in the first part of the book that he in fact is Odysseus. And I think that's part of the reason why she makes the eagle come back, because that's a very unusual feature. Somebody else.
Can we look at that passage, because it's very complex?
Yeah, it is. Yes.
So if we don't have it in front of us, I think we do have viewers joining us. So so Sarah is going to present that text. So I'm going to present what she's showing to everybody. Thank you, Sarah. So this is your translation, Olga, from your.
Yeah. So you see where it says, "But the eagle came back." So she's lamenting for her killed geese, and that's where we expect her friends to step in. And instead, the eagle comes back. Right. So now we are in variation territory. This is where she is manipulating this traditional song for her purposes, like only a virtuoso poet would be able to do. But the eagle came back and settled on the projecting roof beam, and in a human voice consoled me and spoke to me. "Take heart, daughter of far-famed Icarius. This is not a dream, but a true waking vision, and it will come to fulfillment." And everything here is strange. The eagle is coming back. He's speaking in the human voice, and then he says, "These geese are the suitors, but I was an eagle before." Well, he still is an eagle now as he is speaking.
Right.
So this is really, the voice of the eagle isn't even consisting with the voice of the eagle in the dream. It pushes out through the boundaries of the dream into the voice of Odysseus. Odysseus is the only one who can properly say, "But I was an eagle before, and now I come back, and I am your husband, and I will bring an ugly death upon all of the suitors." Not the eagle, but Odysseus. But the eagle says that in a human voice, so we can have no doubt about who this eagle is. And so the manipulation of this narrative leads to this slight illogicality that the eagle says, "I was an eagle before," when he is still an eagle, but also to a very beautiful sort of transition from the dream space into the real space, where Penelope is telling the story to Odysseus, and Odysseus is sitting across from her and responding.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Can you tell us a little bit about that distinction between this is not a dream but a true waking vision? Can you talk a little bit about that idea of a waking vision?
That's another thing where I think we see the language sort of stretching to achieve this extraordinary thing that Penelope is doing, where she says it's not a dream but a true waking vision, and I translate the word hupar as a true waking vision, but people have objected to that. They say that just means not a dream, but or not a false dream, but a true dream, or a prophetic dream, something like that, which I don't think is true, because and the reason they say that is because hupar might actually be etymologically connected to hypnos, the word for sleep. And so since hupar should mean something you see in your sleep, people think, well, that means it's a different kind of dream. Onar is one kind of dream, and a hupar is a different kind of dream, maybe a true dream. But I looked at all the other usages, instances of hupar in Greek, and I can't find one which is actually like that. It's not used to mean a prophetic dream. It's used to mean something that you see with your own eyes. And I think that even though it might etymologically come from the word for sleep, it stopped being the word that is used for everyday word dream. That's something else. That's oneros, and came to be used only in opposition. One onar versus hupar. And because of that opposition, I think hupar developed to mean not dream, but actually what you see when you're awake. So there are actually expressions meaning wide awake that that use this word. And for me, the kind of most telling context is in Pindar's, which one is it? I forget now. The ode where Bellerophon has a dream where Athena is giving him the bridle, so he can perform his heroic feats, and he sees the dream that Athena is putting the horse bridle by his side, and then when he wakes up, then it becomes hupar. The bridle is actually there. It's not as if he somehow goes from one dream, which is less prophetic, to another dream, which is more prophetic. That's not what happens. He actually wakes up, and hupar is what Olympians 13. Thank you, and hupar is actually what he sees then. So I think that hupar is a hint to Odysseus when she says this is no dream but waking vision. It's not only the eagle in the dream that says, Penelope, you didn't just see a dream, you saw a true prophecy. But it's Penelope telling to Odysseus, it's not only my dream, it's also what I see now in front of me. I understand this is a waking vision. And then she adds something that is paradoxical. She says the eagle says it is a waking vision which will be fulfilled. Nowhere else do we have this expression. Something that can be fulfilled is usually a promise, a word, a thought, and he had a hope that can be fulfilled, but waking visions can be fulfilled. But I think it applies perfectly to this situation where she sees Odysseus, it's a waking vision, but it hasn't been fulfilled yet. He hasn't come back to Odysseus. I go back to that Janet was making a point that when Alpamish arrives, Barchin sort of doesn't really welcome him as if he hasn't arrived yet, until he proves that he really is Alpamish, that he can, not that she doubts his identity, but he has to win the contest to really be what Alpamish is supposed to be. And so it's a waking dream, it's a waking vision, and yet, well, the eagle says it will be fulfilled.
Dazzling. Okay, so Maria Zandu has just joined us, so thank you, Maria, for joining us. Maria, did you have a question or a comment? If not, that's okay. No, not at this point. Okay, that's fine. Oh, Bill, looks like Bill has a question or comment.
Hi, we were talking earlier about the courtship. What do we know about the original courtship of Penelope and Odysseus?
Well, we only have very late sources for original courtship of Penelope and Odysseus, but there is actually something that I always think of. There is a story in Pausanias about how Odysseus comes to Sparta, because I don't think that's actually the case in Homeric Odyssey. I'm not sure that from the point of view of Homeric Odyssey, Penelope comes from Sparta, but in this version of the story, Odysseus comes to Sparta to court Penelope, and it's interesting that it's what we know is the stories are sometimes that he came there to court Helen and then decided not to do that, which will be very interesting because he perhaps realized that he would get a lot of trouble if he got Helen, or maybe that he would never get her.
He chose wisely, perhaps.
Chose wisely, exactly. Yes, decided to sort of pull out of the competition and make some kind of deal with Icarius, Penelope's father, to have Penelope instead. There is a story that I really like, the one I started telling in Pausanias, in which Odysseus wins Penelope's hand and then is taking her away from Sparta, and Icarius, her father, decides that he doesn't want her to go after all, and so he pursues them in the chariot. So what was just a wedding, a moment ago, turns into a kind of scene of abduction. And Penelope is sort of like Hippodamia in the chariot with Odysseus, and the father, Icarius, is like in a mouse in full pursuit. And when he reaches them, he asks Penelope whether she would like to not go with Odysseus after all and return to him. And all Penelope does is veils her face. And from that one gesture, her father realizes that no, she wants to go with Odysseus, and he returns home. And on the place where that happens, they set up a sculpture, a personified eidos, personified, I don't know how to translate eidos, it's a very difficult word, respect, veneration, some people would say shame, the modesty. Maybe modesty is a good translation in this way, but it's I think that story is actually, it has, I think, points of contact with Penelope that we have from the Odyssey, in a sense of sort of, I think Gloria Ferrari in her book Figures of Speech formulated that very well, and she said something like, always and in all ways, Penelope knows her place.
Thank you. Perfect.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I just saw the time. It's 11:59. So we're just about ready to sign off. I want to thank you, Olga, for joining us. It's such a beautiful discussion. I know our conversation is going to continue for a while in our community. I did want to let everyone know about a few other upcoming events. On October 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Joel Christensen will join us. And then on October 29th, sorry, did I say October 22nd before? And then on October 29th, Leonard Milner and Douglas Frame will come join us to discuss touring the Ionian Dodecapolis with Homer in mind. Not Decapolis. I'm flashing back to my Athenadze days. The main hero of Athenadze series. So this is so helpful. I don't see how, once we have seen the dream of Barchin, we can see the dream of Penelope in the same way again. I mean, it just shows how powerful the traditional song culture is, and about how it's the control and the use of that tradition that actually allows the singer to do the most amazing things.
Yeah, well, I think that I can just put in a plug for comparative studies.
Yes.
I think that sometimes people look down on comparative studies a little bit because it feels somehow not as rigorous. You're supposed to just keep your mind on what you're studying, and it feels maybe less rigorous because you can know only so many languages well, so you're not a specialist. How can you properly use this material? I think that there are challenges, definitely, but I think there is that really, as Richard Martin said, the comparative studies, this is our testing laboratory. This is sometimes looking at comparative material is the only way to test your ideas that you have about ancient Greece.
Amazing. So Olga, thank you again. You've really inspired us. I want to remind everyone they could read your book, Eva the Festival, Making Myth in Odyssey 19, on the CHS website at chs.harvard.edu. And thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to our next event. I hope you'll come back and join us again.
It's always wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.